So we're really lucky to have a panel, and we're going to try and capture some of the essence of the workshops as well, so there's some continuity, continuing the focus on action and implementation. So our three panel members are John Allan, who did his medical training in Queensland, and I didn't realise his psychiatry training in Adelaide, so it's redemption for you, John. He's currently the Executive Director of Mental Health and Drug and Alcohol Services in Queensland Health, and he's been the Chief Psychiatrist in Queensland and New South Wales, and also led clinical services. Our second speaker is Indigo Daya, and she's held consumer leadership roles across mental health for more than 14 years, including community and clinical sectors, academia and government. She has a lived experience as a survivor of childhood trauma, madness and coercive mental health services. And she's passionate, if you haven't worked this out already, about consumer-led change that puts human rights first. And there's always room for more passion. And she's currently the Human Rights Advisor at VMIAC, Victorian Mental Illness Association Awareness Council, and Research Fellow at the Melbourne Social Equity Institute, Faculty of Law, University of Melbourne. And Mark Morgan is a senior representative from the College of GPs. He's also the chair of the College of GPs Expert Committee in Quality Care, and he provides advice on healthcare policy and developmental guidelines. And we're hoping that, a mantra of influence and be influenced, that both of those things will happen, Mark, and some of the things from this conference will go back to the Quality Committee, and I'm sure will be influenced by you. He's also an associate professor on uni, and also a GP at Eastbrook Family Clinic, Burleigh Waters. And prior to this, there's a recurrent theme here. He was a GP in the Adelaide Hills, and he strives to develop trusting relationships with his patients to ensure best care. The structure of this, I'm just going to ask the three panel members to spend 5 minutes just summarising some of their reflections on the day and also the workshop they were engaged with. And then I want to open it up to a sort of question and answer to sort of think about the opportunity for us to sort of interrogate and sort of test some of the ideas that have sort of emerged through the day. So we might start with John, who has 5 minutes, and your time starts now.
Thank you, Russell. I can't imagine 200 people in a room like this anywhere else in the world, actually, so it's a bit hard to believe. I'm just going to summarise the sessions we had this afternoon. We had a number of presentations around smoking and smoking and mental illness and what to do about that. And then we had obviously a workshop. We had probably, I think, one of the smaller workshops, but a really enthusiastic and fantastic group of people. I just want to say that up first before they say their people were really fantastic and enthusiastic, because ours were more. And just to thank Kathy, who introduced the session, and also to Irene, who wrote the notes for me. But just some of the themes that we really thought about, which were really important. One was the nature of the linking up of things. So we talked about what you can do at a local level, what partnerships you need to have, and what do we need to park for action at a higher level as well. And what we noted from the local level was really about the linking up, that when services actually took on board the notion that they could help people to quit smoking, train their staff, have good leadership, made those pathways available, and then got into partnerships. And we particularly worked with Quitline in a number of the presentations that we had, that things could be really different. So that was the first point, that it's quite possible to do all these things on a very large scale. I think very much about what I heard in that first keynote today about implementation. Secondly, that one of the myths that we need to defeat about smoking is not just that quitting smoking will make mental illness worse or something like that, but also some of our staff myths, which were that no one actually knew what Quitline did properly. And we talked about the training that people had and exposure they had, because Quitline is actually a treatment service that can help people quit, it's not just an advice service. And it probably needs to be up there with the status of things like a better access service, because it's actually about treating a particular problem. So I think learning about the strength of partnerships is really important. The other things that we talked about in great depth were what the consumer message is and what the consumer experience is, and whether or not this is really a medical problem or whether it's actually a problem of the determinants of health, it's really a sociological problem, or whether it's actually a financial problem. Smoking, one of the major reasons to quit smoking is actually around the financial pressure and the way that it affects your life rather than just your health pressures. And then we need to tailor the message to everybody in relation to that, rather than just a very general message. So if we can make it about what that person is interested in, or whether we change the way that the message comes, it would be good for us. And the other area that we talked in great detail about was facilitating peer-to-peer work. This is a great opportunity where a person who, on their own recovery journey, has been able to improve their physical health by quitting smoking or other things. But they're a great resource and currently underutilised in terms of helping other people to do that. Because we really saw this as part of the recovery journey rather than just another medical thing. If you can reframe it in that way for people, and it's an empowering thing to quit smoking, then we're going to get a lot better results than just haranguing people about it all the time. We also had some great discussions around the cost of NRT and about what it is, what are the incentives to actually give up smoking, and whether or not we've got the message right. We talked about a number of different models in the presentations that we'd had, but we actually think that the current situation for NRT, where you get 3 months on a script, for people who might need a number of attempts at quitting, it's not right. So you're going to get 3 months in 1 calendar year, and then to quit smoking, you probably need NRT, and you need a whole lot of things. You actually need some treatment, like NRT or one of the drugs. You need the right counselling, you need the right environment. But to get that combination of NRT that people need with the lozenges and the sprays and so on, that we actually need to advocate strongly for people in a marginalised position to be able to get that for free or have it highly subsidised. The cost-benefit ratio of actually being able to help people change that part of their life, and the benefits further down the track to the health system are obvious. So why is it that efficacy hasn't worked so far from that? What have we done wrong that we need to change for that? Those are the main things. Anything else from the group you want to add? Thank you, Russell. How long? So I'm quite interested in the notion of what tobacco companies own, and I think that that's one of the things that we actually need to further investigate. I'm quite concerned about vaping in that same way. So, but there is really good evidence that NRT is much less harmful for you than a tobacco product. So, in a pragmatic sense, we do have to deal with it, but in terms of the ownership thing, I think there's a much larger policy debate, which I didn't talk about, which I talked about in my session, around whether or not vaping should actually be allowed in the free market, or whether it should be heavily controlled through prescription and so on. So that's a good question.
Thanks, John. Indigo.
Thank you. Can people hear me okay?
Yeah.
Fantastic. There's actually it's a bit different. There's a strange kind of echo experience when you're using the microphone that I haven't experienced before. So if I suddenly stop because I can't quite hear myself, you'll know what's going on. So thanks for the invitation to speak here. I've had so many reflections during the day today. I felt like it was important as a consumer speaker on this panel to speak not just about my reflections on what's been said today, but also on what hasn't been said. I think it's always a really important role as a consumer advocate to point out what's missing and try to be politely but a little bit disruptive where possible. So that's what I'll try to do. And I guess when I think about what I haven't heard today, I guess I came back to, I took a little map on my notepad before, and I was thinking about the different sort of places that physical health problems for consumers come from. And I was thinking about in our workshop with the Mental Health Complaints Commissioner, we were looking at a lot of issues that were around pre-existing physical health conditions, and a whole lot of problems around people accessing their medication or medical equipment that people needed, through to something as basic as being able to access a breast pump or a CPAP machine, which is for, yes, those things when you're breathing at night when you snore. I didn't know what it was. So all of that kind of space. And I was thinking there's lots of health conditions that we might have that are kind of separate to our mental health experiences. There's then physical health problems that are a kind of consequence of our mental health experiences, of living with extreme emotions and trauma and distress. and it's not a perfect correlation, but I think a lot of substance use and smoking, we can connect with that. Certainly in my own experience and many close friends and colleagues, that feels to be true, that when we're living in perpetual pain and when mental health services aren't really able to help us to shift that pain, we'll find other ways to address that pain. And so that strikes me as a different sort of category of physical health problems, and that the root of that, yes, we can work on the health problem itself, like smoking, but it's important to also come back to the root cause around, is there actually a whole lot of emotional and trauma issues that we're not addressing? And as consumers, we speak about that a lot, that if we could really genuinely shift away from current biomedical models, and I know our friend Simon Strafacci, who's clinical director at the Alfred Hospital, he and I were having a big debate up at the THEMS conference recently. He was saying we're not really medical models, but in practice it is, because if you're admitted to a psychiatric unit, there is no one who's admitted to a psychiatric unit who isn't prescribed psychiatric medications. That's what your treatment is, but you might get ECT as well. We are still failing to address people's experiences of trauma, of emotional distress, and I think that has a correlation to physical health problems, and that's not something we've spoken a lot about. I'd love to see that, I suspect many consumers would love to see that brought into this mix. Another space that people have spoken a bit about is the impact of socioeconomic disadvantage or social determinants. And of course there are many health problems that we have as consumers that are common to other people who live often in poverty or with a whole lot of less advantage in lots of areas in our lives. And so those problems aren't unique to us. They're shared by many other people with disadvantage, but there's a responsibility on the sector to understand where those problems come from and to support us as allies in not just addressing the health problems, but in addressing the disadvantage itself. I know what I'm doing is increasing the scope of equally well to become quite massive, but that was my intent. And I guess the final area that I've heard the least about, although of course VMIAC CEO Maggie spoke to this earlier today, and I would absolutely agree with Maggie that the biggest priority for mental health consumers, but perhaps the least spoken about subject that we've seen, are the physical health harms that come as a consequence of psychiatric treatment. And we would say they are the first priority, because if we had not come to your services, we would not have those health problems. And that this is another wicked problem, I guess. Someone before speaking about wicked problems. I understand from my work with clinicians in the sector how hard this is to tackle. But I hope we all understand that until we tackle it, we are not going to make a difference in physical health. It's a really, really hard one to confront, but I hope that in future Equally Well symposiums we see entire streams that are full of psychiatry practitioners speaking about how we're actually starting to change prescribing practices. And the other stream that runs alongside that on thinking about harm minimisation or harm prevention from psychiatric treatments is the issue of human rights, which we spoke about in our Complaints Commissioner workshop. Chris Maley and myself will speak about this again tomorrow morning. But there's a very uncomfortable reality that a large number of consumers, and we don't know how many, but I know I was one of them, don't even know that we're at risk because of psychiatric treatment. Certainly I was never told about the risks of psychiatric treatments. And this is a whole different level. There's lots of treatments in other areas of health. Psychiatry is not unique in having treatments that can have very serious ill effects. But perhaps it's more unique in not telling patients that that is the case. So it's one thing to be harmed by treatments, another thing to not even know that's going to happen. And so until we shift prescribing practices, but we also have to fundamentally shift informed consent in practice. Because if we're sending people out of our services with a huge new risk to their health and people don't don't even know, then of course we're going to keep dying, of course we're going to keep getting sick. We have the right to know that impact. Even if we haven't been given the dignity of the right to say no to treatment, we have the right to know if we're at risk so that we can do something about that. So for me, that were some critical gaps that I'd love to see us expand on. And I'll just have a little... So I probably need to wrap it up from there. And actually, I think I will, because I think they were the important reflections. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Indigo. And there'll be more. You might have noticed on the program tomorrow there's a long opportunity to talk about this issue of medication and all those sub-issues that you've touched on today. So there'll be an opportunity if you wanted to explore this a lot more and have your say. And we're really keen to capture those insights and recommendations. Thanks, Indigo. Mark.
Well, firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting Just a GP to talk here. So tongue-in-cheek. I've heard a lot about the problems that are faced. I'm tremendously optimistic because I've heard some wonderful examples of projects that are making a really big difference in community mental health services, in psychiatry-led services. What I'd like to talk about is where GPs fit into this. When it works well, general practice is able to provide planned, proactive care that has a wraparound service that coordinates care across the sectors, that looks after people's physical health and mental health as one thing. All GPs know that every consult has components of both. We look after, when it's working well, we look after the future care needs and the immediate care needs of the people that we see, and we know who our population is. Unfortunately, the system doesn't encourage that high-quality general practice. The system pays for the sort of transactional face-to-face care on a time-limited consultations. And anyone that's tried to communicate at a system level with general practice knows how difficult it can be to break past the defences we put up to protect our time. The GP receptionists are well known, aren't they? So, in our group, we talked about how that funding model does make it difficult, but how there are some chinks of light in the future. We talked about some of the aspects of the government's healthcare home model, which has changed the funding arrangements for people with long-term medical conditions to provide block funding, tiered according to how complex those conditions are. And it may not be the perfect model. In fact, it was implemented really poorly. But it does open the way for some blue sky thinking about how general practice could be an even bigger part of the solution. After all, we do see almost every consumer, almost every year. And so from an access point of view, there's a great potential to do good. In our room, we talked about some of the other system changes that are happening. The medical benefits schedule, that thing that pays rebates to patients for every time they access GPs and specialists outside of hospital services. That's being reviewed right now, kind of one time in a generation review. And there's opportunities within that, and you can see this happening, to shift the mindset from that transactional, short, frequent consults to a system where you have a population of people that you know, that are involved in your practice and you can look after, not necessarily face-to-face, by telephone, by using the team better. So I think there's a great deal of hope that general practice will be a bigger part of the answer to the things we've been discussing in this meeting. We went on and did some blue sky thinking, and I have to say this is not College of GPs policy. But we did talk, because there were no pharmacists in the room, we talked about getting pharmacists out of their shops and into primary care roles. doing their education about medication and medication governance in practices, and not having community pharmacists running shops. We talked about psychiatrists not doing very much seeing patients one-on-one, but doing more of a shared care and consultation liaison service, and psychiatrists being distributed more evenly across the country. There were no psychiatrists in our room, so we were able to have that conversation also. And we talked about the greater generalist roles for allied health practitioners. We talked about how the podiatrist, the dietitian, the exercise physiologist, the practice nurse were all able to take a role in both looking after and directing some of the mental health concerns of patients, rather than being siloed into separate little specialities and needing a fragmented team or kind of individuals to deal with one bit of the body and the next bit when it's all connected. So there was some good discussion about blue sky thinking, some optimistic thoughts about the future of general practice as part of the solution to this. And I've heard some wonderful examples in this room today about what has worked, and it'd be lovely to see those examples roll out and become more universal. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Matt. Just so we capture all the workshops, I've just asked Andrew if he could just make maybe one or two very quick points. Could we, Andrew Watkins, can you raise your hand? Where are you? Oh, right there. And then, I don't know if Lynn or Chris wants to raise a point from your workshop, and also Helen and Emma, if you wanted to get the key point out of your workshop to just throw into the mix. So, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. So I was in the workshop on healthy lifestyle, diet and exercise, and we had a great presentation from Rebecca Allan, which was fantastic. And there were so many ideas, so many fantastic ideas that just 10 minutes. I've got about 60 seconds to try and distill some of the essence out of that. But in terms of the positive action section, what people want to go back and do in their environments, one of the big things is Indigo was talking about, you know, that psychiatric care isn't really an option, or psychiatric treatment is not really an option for people. You know, once you're in the system, you don't really get to opt into it. And I think we've got to think about yeah. So what we were kind of talking about as a group was this idea that you, with physical health care, it's more like it's not getting offered at the moment a lot of the time, but when it is offered, that it's offered in that it's there and people opt out of it rather than, oh, it's here, just if you want it. So having that opt-out model rather than people needing to opt into something if they're compelled to have psychiatric treatment, then we need to have physical health lifestyle interventions to go along with that as part of normal routine care. Some of the other positive actions were really getting an understanding of what the needs were of consumers, so making sure there's a good needs analysis done. A lot of talk around staff education and training activities so that mental health staff got skilled up to deliver interventions. And just some of the basic stuff was going through, like just, you know, individuals, we have nearly all cold-faced clinicians in our room. It's just like, okay, well, there's no rule that a session has to take place in a small council room. We can get out and we can do a walk and talk, and we can do that session outside, or we're doing a bit of exercise, and we can be good role models for our consumers as well in physical health. In terms of future actions, one of the things that came through really strongly was having the peer workforce heavily involved in this action, so in physical healthcare, so in the front line of discussing physical healthcare with consumers, and also the co-facilitation of running lifestyle groups. Of course, we had a lot of exercise physiologists and dietitians in our room, and there was a lot of calls for more of those professionals to be integrated in mental health services. And the third thing was, you know, the future action overall was this idea at the moment that physical health care is in policy as recommendations and moving those recommendations towards mandatory policies, that there's an expectation from the service that these interventions need to take place. And that was Alfred.
One of the things I loved about, and Rebecca Allan, where are you, Rebecca, fronted this workshop, and those of you familiar with Victorian, a while ago had a mental health plan called, I think mental health is everybody's business, and they had a mental health plan similar to that in the UK, which says mental health is everybody's business. Rebecca, who doesn't know that history as an exercise physiologist, presented her presentation, this is a theme in fact last year, was saying physical health is everybody's business. And it's such a great message for us in mental health, where we say physical health is everybody's business in mental health. So I just love that turn of the clock there, Rebecca. It's really lovely. For us, we've got a bit of history in mental health to see how that's turned, and a really salutary message. Lynn, did you have... No? Or Chris? Okay, we're going to open it to the floor then, and see if there's any... Oh, sorry. Emma, sorry. Emma and Helen, you had something, you're ready to go. Can you tell us the key message that you think came out of your workshop group? Put you on the spot or anything?
So the workshop was around what makes collaboration successful. If I've got one thing, there was a couple of comments, so I can't pick one. How we might recognise, so we talked about, some of the knowledge skills, as well as the values. So some of these comments around the values that make collaboration successful. And humour, that silos get in the way of collaboration. But a couple of little gems, I thought. One around how we might recognise peer experience as a professional discipline. Sorry, I can't do that and talk at the same time. And a nice little example about when we're thinking about values, that we need to really understand the meaning behind when people are talking about their values. And a nice little example from Allan about, I might say my value having a car, but actually what that car represents is valuing having the freedom to do the things I want.
Thank you. You know, we talk about integration, and we're still struggling to define it, to be frank. There's, people sort of understand it's vertical and horizontal integration, but there's other dimensions to that. Probably, I think, at least 3 other dimensions. But one of them I call transcendental integration. And it's a really important part that's overlooked, which is the integration of values, of sharing values, because often different values of services stop true integration and a true approach to care. I'm so glad that you picked up on that importance of values in terms of collaboration or integration, as Lucy was sort of moving on to as well. Okay, any questions from our panellists? They're all pretty tough cookies, so we like controversial and stimulating questions. We've got one here and then one here. So Kim, there's another one at the front, I think. Okay, and one at the back.
Thank you. This is to John.
Oh no, in the middle and then we'll go back and then in the front. So the lady red first, and you'll be second.
Sabrina from Cairns. John, you know me. How are you? I was wondering what you think is the major barrier to the culture shift that we need, that people require to have their physical health needs given a priority.
How long have we got, Alison?
Can you give me a short answer, please?
I've never had a short conversation with you in my life. Look, I think it's a really important question about culture shift. I hope that this is the start of the culture shift, quite honestly. I think that I've been talking about this for a long time, and so have you and others, and I feel that to get this together as a movement is a really important thing. Maybe just to say that I learned 2 things that were really important today, which I hadn't thought about. One was that I was talking about the anti-smoking message and how mainstream advertising hasn't worked for people, right? And then I saw a presentation by a consumer which just talked about recovery and what empowerment was in recovery, and how we had to have that as a message about physical health, about regaining your physical health as part of your recovery. And I think once people actually get that, I'm talking about the service people get it, right? I think we can then start to put a narrative around that person's voice and the voice of people in the system to make that change, because you can really understand that, right? And the second thing I learned today was that I think in the keynote this morning, talking about implementation, and just about connecting things up, that we know so much stuff, but we don't ever have the system that allows us to demonstrate it. And so services will change when they're able to use their knowledge to make a difference, and they can see the difference happening. Lots of the time they do stuff because they've got no idea why they're doing it, or they do it because they used to do it and it didn't make any difference. So I think if we can get people to understand that will change, will happen, but it does require a movement like this, I think. Does that help? I don't know.
We were talking about this in 2013 at the ERG, about specifically the smoking being a specific difficulty for those with mental health disorders, or conditions.
Yeah, when things have changed.
We've got quite a few questions, so we might sort of hold that on for tomorrow's discussion. Thank you. We've got a question at the back. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Agnes. I'm from Eastern Melbourne Primary Health Network. Don't really have a question per se, but I just wanted to say in response to some of the blue sky thinking that Mark had in his workshop this afternoon. I thought it was really fascinating just hearing what you had to share with the room today, because I can immediately think of 3 pilots that we've currently commissioned in the Eastern Regional Melbourne, addressing a lot of the, ideas that you had. So for starters, we've got a psychiatric advice and consultation service where the Melbourne Clinic are doing capacity building and primary and secondary consultations, and also workshops for general practices and their staff. Secondly, we've got an older person specific, it's also like a primary and secondary consultation service where they, Eastern Health came to us, and they have the idea of imparting the knowledge in tertiary health into primary health, acknowledging that a lot of older people don't want to necessarily go into hospital, have that stigma put against them, and have that relationship with the GP and be maintained by that. And then lastly, with what was the second blue sky thinking?
So can you repeat that?
The second blue sky idea, so it was the pharmacists. That's another thing that we've got on the ground at the moment, having pharmacists in the GP clinic, providing advice to the GPs, but also doing the medication reviews and also conferencing with patients at the moment. So it's like really interesting to hear that this is blue sky thinking on the ground, but it's actually something that we're working towards, changing the culture shift of how mental health is being looked at and how it's being managed in the community, and building that bridge between all the different health services that people may potentially run across. And it's just, I just wanted to share what's happening on the ground at the moment. Thank you.
And can I, that raises the opportunity, can I encourage people, if you've got great stories like that you want to share, please email us, Equally Well support group at Charles Uni, and so we distribute them to the broader Equally Well community. Because, I knew that, Libby's PHN in Brisbane North was doing great stuff, Central East and Sydney are doing great stuff in the PHN. We didn't know about this, so the more we can share these innovations, the more we can roll that out and make a difference. We'll have to make this the last question, and then you can ask the panel members just for after that question, one take-home message, snappy, in terms of the most important thing we should think about in terms of next steps after we respond to our final question. Thank you.
So, it is echoing. I just wanted to say, I'm not here tomorrow, so I suppose there's a couple of things that I would like to say, and that is that when we talk about physical health, what I'm feeling from today's session is that it's around the optimum physical health, and I think that people that we have those of us with the lived experience often don't even get our basic physical health needs met. So I think that hasn't particularly been addressed. And the other thing that, because I am feeling like that it's very individualistic, and so I think that I would love to see a stream next time too around how we often use our bodies very successfully to in relation to protecting ourselves. So a trauma stream would be particularly good, I think. And the other, I suppose, challenge to PHNs is I would like to see them with their GP training to look at ways of educating GPs, etc., about helping people to reduce their antipsychotic medication, and if that's at all possible, because a lot of people are on large doses, and people don't know how to reduce that. So I don't know if that's a question or a statement.
Really? It's a statement. What I might do is ask the panel if they want you to respond, and then lead into your final take-home message. So John's passing that to you, Indigo. How appropriate.
Fantastic. I don't know what my final reflection will be. Something will come out, but but in response, I just wanted to say thanks, Deb, and in fact, I'd support all of that at VMIAC, and in every role I've had as a consumer worker. I hear constantly about people's experience of trauma, and very often we talk about what that means for our bodies. That, we're not separate beings with a mental health over here and a physical health over there. It's all connected. But also that in VMIAC's introduction to Victoria's Equally Well framework, we spoke about, and maybe this would be the point, that a shift we'd like to see that is maybe, I don't know if it's achievable or not, I don't have a clue actually, but we'd love to see some interim steps being actively looking at how do we reduce polypharmacy, so particularly prescribing multiple antipsychotics at once, and how do we reduce really high doses of psychiatric medication. And we suggest that a place to begin looking at that is for people on compulsory treatment orders, that compulsory treatment has enough problems without compulsorily giving someone such a risky situation, polypharmacy in high doses. So we'd love to see someone somewhere take the step of saying, let's even do a review of people on compulsory treatment orders, what's happening in terms of polypharmacy and doses, and what steps could we start to take to target that group of people who are most at risk and have the least say to improve that space.
Thank you. John, and then John, final statement. I was going to give you the last word because I don't think you're just a GP, so I think, Mark, you deserve the last word. John, you can...
So look, my final reflection is probably just a simple one. It's actually quite complex, isn't it? It's quite a complex story that we try to do. I would hope the one thing that we get out of this is the notion that if we are able to have our bodies and minds functioning properly as one, we're going to feel better. And all different ways into that. And I understand a bit about base and high performance and so on, and we heard some of the keynote today. I think that the final message is that this is something that we haven't really got right for a long time. We have an opportunity now to start to get it straight right. What you were saying about adding stuff, I think, yeah, we need to do all that. We've got to work on getting all those things that are really important. I think that's true. We spent a lot of time this afternoon, the groups I was in, talking very much about the nature of trauma and why people go through trauma, and what we can do, and why we should be starting with trauma rather than starting with somewhere else. And so everything has a spin-off. There's no wrong door. Whatever way you go into it is important. And I think it's really important not to get caught up thinking that because someone talks about one thing, they ignore the other thing that's there. It's all on the table.
And thank you, guys. GPs are specialists, and their speciality is comprehensive physical health care. So I think it's appropriate that you have the last say for this panel.
And if you'll let me have two, not one. With some of these wonderful boutique projects that I've heard about today, I've heard about them in isolation of general practice. I think if my first take-home message would be, I know it's not easy to get through to GPs, but work with GPs, please, in these efforts, because you'll actually find a group of people that are dedicated to patient care, highly skilled in both physical and mental health, who know how to look after medicines, given the opportunity, know how to look after and monitor physical ill health, know how to help people with smoking cessation and things like that. So if you want a sustainable and a project to have legs beyond the small project that's got limited funding, then find a way of working with GPs. That was point one. Point two is that as a GP, if I'm seeing somebody, and this goes to the highest priority of consumers, which was a surprise to me, I didn't expect psychotic medication side effects and to be the highest priority, but given that that's what we heard, for GPs to be part of the solution to reducing medication, there needs to be some acknowledgement of who's the key decision maker for that patient at what time. And I think if we could think of one kind of change that could come out of this conversation today, it might be that the community mental health services, or the psychiatric services, or the consumers, the GPs, work out who's responsible for changing medications. And if you give that responsibility to GPs with some limitations and some access to care if things need to be changed, you'll find it can work. But if you don't, they'll just go, well, that bit of that person's care has been siloed somewhere else, we won't touch it, we'll leave it alone, we'll concentrate on other things, and it will just carry on the way it's been set as the person left hospital. So it's a small point, but I think it's an important outcome from today, that if that's the high priority, let's tackle that priority. And one way is to be explicit about who can make clinical decisions at any point in time. Thank you.
I think that's a lovely way to sum up the day in terms of both individually and as a constituency and a collective, we're better together. So I think that's a lovely way to summarise. Can we please thank John, Indigo and Mark. We have a very exciting moment, I think, in the history of Victorian mental health and Australian mental health. We've got the launch of the Victorian mental health strategy in a few minutes, so have a bit of a stretch while our Victorian friends get themselves organised, and invite you to participate in that. And then following that, straight after that, we'll have some drinks and a networking function. Thank you.